Hello, welcome to our video on absolute value. Let's start by defining what we mean by that term absolute value. Here's the definition. The absolute value of a number is its distance from zero on a number line. So make sure you get that definition in your Cornell notes on that left side, the thin column. And now let's visually look and see what we're talking about. Let's say that this is 0 on the number line. And on my number line, I would plot the number 5. Be right there. All right? The absolute value of 5 is the distance the number is from 0. Well, that distance is a distance of 5 units. Here's the absolute value symbol. It's two vertical lines. So if I have the number 5 inside that symbol, that's asking me what's the absolute value of 5. And that would equal 5. Now let's consider negative 5. Negative 5 on the number line would be 5 units to the left of 0, over here. And the absolute value of negative 5 is going to be the distance from 0. Well, that distance is also 5 units. Because you cannot have a negative distance. If you're measuring a distance will always be positive. So the absolute value of negative 5 is also equal to 5. And visually we can see that both those numbers are the same distance from 0. So they both have the same absolute value. All right, now let's go ahead and use our number line to add a couple numbers together. Let's add negative 3 and 6. So using my number line, let's go ahead and mark where 0 is. Here's 0. Let's plot negative 3. Okay, that's 3 units to the left of 0. And I'm going to add 6, which means I'm going to go to the right in the positive direction. So if I add 6 to negative 3, I go 1, 2, 3. That gets me back to 0. 4, 5, 6. I end up at positive 3. So negative 3 plus 6 equals a positive 3. And this is how you can use a number line to add. All right, so now let's talk about what we do when we add positives and negatives. And here's a little quote that we used to sing in 6th and 7th grade. Okay, I want you to put this in your notes. Okay, so when we add positive and negative numbers, here's a rule we can follow. If they have the same signs, you add and keep the signs. Different signs, we're going to subtract. Then we'll keep the sign of the bigger number, in other words, the greater absolute value. Then you will be exact. So for instance, let's look at the example we did on the previous slide. Negative 3 plus 6. Alright, so if I use this rule to add negative 3 plus 6, I would see that I have different signs. I have negative 3 and I have positive 6. So I would subtract them. 6 minus 3 is 3. Then I keep the sign of the greater absolute value, or the bigger number, which in this case is the positive 6. So that's how we can use this rule to get our answer. All right, let's try another one. Let's try negative 13 plus 7. All right, so here, again, I have different signs, right? So I'm going to subtract them. I'm going to go 13 minus 7, which equals 6, and I'll keep the sign of the bigger number, in other words, the greater absolute value number. That would be the negative 13. So this would equal a negative 6. All right, so now let's write down this note. When we want to subtract numbers that are positive or negative, or actually any numbers, you can always add the opposite to get the same answer. All right, so when we subtract using positives and negatives, it's always a good idea to add the opposite. So here's an example of a subtraction, 10 minus 3. All right, well, 10 minus 3 equals 7, of course, but I can prove that adding the opposite gives me the same answer. I can rewrite this as 10. If I add the opposite of 3, that would be adding negative 3. All right, 10 plus negative 3 is also going to equal 7. I could use the little song as a rule that we just did on the previous slide. Since the numbers are different signs, I would subtract them, and I would keep the sign of the bigger number, the positive 10. Okay, so 10 minus 3, you wouldn't really bother to write 10 plus negative 3 because you know 10 minus 3 is 7. But this is a great rule to use when we are adding and subtracting with negatives. So for instance, what if I did this? What if I had negative 10 minus 3? Okay, that could be a little confusing. Some students would look at that and go, oh, I think it's negative 7, or, they're not sure. Okay, so in this case, let's use this rule. Let's add the opposite. Let's add the opposite of 3, which would be negative 3. All right, so now I can see that I'm adding two numbers that have the same sign. They're both negative. So I'm going to add them and then keep the sign. So 10 plus 3 is 13, and it's going to be negative 13. Let's try this one. How about 10 subtract negative 3? All right, that's can be confusing too. Some students would think that's 7 or negative 7. So let's use this rule. To subtract, let's add the opposite. So let's add the opposite of negative 3 is positive 3. So this would be 10 plus 3. This would equal 13. All right, so use that rule when we're adding and subtracting with negatives. All right, so here's some examples to do. We already did this one, so you don't have to do that one. All right, so go ahead and add these together, or add these two problems. Do those two problems. And remember, you can pause your video and then check your answer afterwards to see how you did. Okay, so if you paused your video, welcome back. Let's do the first one. Negative 3 plus negative 16. Well, those are the same sign, so we're going to add them together, and we're going to keep the sign, so it's going to be negative 19. How'd you do on that one? All right, let's do this one. These are different signs, so one's positive 6.2, the other is negative 4.9. We're going to subtract. So 6.2 minus 4.9. So we get 1.3, and we're going to keep the sign of the bigger number, the greater absolute value. In this case, the positive number is the bigger number. So this equals 1.3. Okay, did you get that one? All right. And don't forget, read some books.